Welcome to the Leather Lounge, a weekly show recorded live every Tuesday where we explore the latest innovations in the Bitcoin ecosystem. From DeFi and dApps to digital art, we bring you in-depth conversations with developers, artists, and community leaders who are shaping the future. Whether you're here to learn about cutting-edge projects or to deepen your understanding of blockchain basics and decentralization, Leather is your go-to source for all things Bitcoin. Content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, or company. We encourage you to conduct your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. Welcome back to the Leather Lounge, where each week we bring you conversations with the most prominent thought leaders, founders, builders, artists, and innovators in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm your host, Sean Longstreet, and today we're joined by Hadan, poet in residence at the ALEX Lab Foundation, one of the leading platforms in Bitcoin DeFi. ALEX has been building on Bitcoin since 2021, evolving from a standalone DEX into a full-stack DeFi platform supporting liquid staking, cross-chain bridging, and native Bitcoin assets. With over 2.6 billion in TVL, they've become a cornerstone of the ecosystem. In today's episode, we'll explore the launch of ALEX DAMM, Discrete Automated Market Maker, a game-changing concentrated liquidity engine, how AI is transforming DeFi UX, the upcoming integration of native USDT via Taproot Assets, and the success of the Surge campaign, which gamifies yield, farming, and governance. We'll also touch on ALEX's remarkable response to last year's devastating hack by the Lazarus Group. In the aftermath, the team acted swiftly, building custom monitoring tools, freezing funds across exchanges, and pursuing legal action. And as of March, they've recovered nearly 1 million STX, now distributed through the ALEX Treasury grant program, with 100% of the protocol revenue continuing to fund user recovery in a fully transparent on-chain process. It's a powerful reminder of what's at stake and what's possible when builders stay committed to resilience, innovation, and user trust. And that's exactly what we aim to spotlight here at the Leather Lounge. If you enjoy these conversations, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and leave us a review. It's one of the best ways that you can support what we're building and to help more listeners discover the people and projects shaping the future of Bitcoin. So with my long-winded intro out of the way, I would like to welcome to the lounge, Hadan. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here with you, Sean. Thank you very much for the generous intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly we have a lot of really great things to get to, but I wanted to start with your intro because in our pre-show, every time we've had a chance to talk about like kind of non-Bitcoin things, I've been fascinated by your background and your side interests. So let's set the context and talk about your transition from university and then your road to joining ALEX and working in this DeFi ecosystem.
Sure. Glad to do it. And so really, I started as a physics major at Harvard. I never thought I'd go into, banking or finance. Around the sort of a third year mark, I think it was kind of evident I wasn't in that like top 5-10% that was going to go on to be those theoretical physicists. And so at that point, I'm like, well, like what else is there to do? And, some banks were recruiting on campus, offering more money than I'd ever seen in my life. So I took the opportunity. I did a summer internship with Goldman Sachs and fixed income. Yeah, I had a full-time offer by the end of the summer. So I did that post-graduation. I worked out of the New York office and the São Paulo office. So it was great to become, well, one, eventually literate, because I think even as a physics major, that isn't something it seems you're really formally taught in schools. And also the sort of network and contacts I've made. And among them was Sean Longstreet, one of the co-founders of ALEX Labs. And after I left banking, I was in the entrepreneurial space, trading crypto, DeFi there for a while. And then, one day I got a call from her. During 2013-14, she was writing a book, rule-based investing, to basically simplify the principles of quantitative investing. And I had a really great experience working with her on that book. Just I guess as my Twitter handle, DeFi poet, just a little bit of poetry, I think, to the sort of math and rules and principles laid out. A really great book. I highly recommend. And in 2021, she gives me a call that she was working on a Bitcoin DeFi startup. And I think my first response was, wait, there's DeFi on Bitcoin? And then, she sent me the information on Stacks, their white paper, like Munib's work at Princeton, was work with JP Singh, and just reading through it all, I was kind of blown away, and I was like, this absolutely makes sense. This is such a strong differentiator to essentially like rebuild Ethereum, but on the sort of a mothership, right, on the rock of Bitcoin itself. And I think today marks almost about 4 years since Chanta, Chan, and Rachel began the conversation around Alex. I joined in September of 2021, so it's about 3.5 years for me. Our testnet was in October of that year. Our mainnet was in January of 2022, which went really well and kind of clogged the old Stacks meme pool up for a couple of days there. And since then it's been that kind of crypto roller coaster ride. When we launched, right, November of 2021 was about when Bitcoin hit those 65K highs for that cycle. And then it wasn't soon after our mainnet that I think in March or April came FTX, and then that sort of a bear, crypto winter of 2022, 2023. We kept building throughout. I think as the Ordinals protocol came out, we made that pivot to the B20 or BRC20 order book, and shifting a bit closer to the L1. And we've really, I guess, continued building from there, both for Stacks DeFi and Bitcoin DeFi as a whole.
How do you guys balance, as soon as something new is happening in the ecosystem, whether it's Ordinals or Taproot Assets, how do you balance, resource management, time management to pivot into new things? What's the framework around that?
Right. I'd say it's never necessarily an easy call to make. I think it's usually a team decision, a lot hinging on what like our CEO, Rachel Yu, might decide on. I remember when Ordinals first came out, just thinking like, oh, great, now we've got meme coins on Bitcoin, kind of like who cares? But it didn't take very long to see how strong the sort of traction was, especially once, Domo, now one of Alex's advisors, launched the BRC20 protocol. Now there were fungible tokens. And now, you had just this phenomenal activity in the meme pool. You saw fees spiking up, all this very like organic grassroots excitement. And so I think it's you sort of kind of take your cues from the community and as much as is possible. And that, you'll sort of have a new trend emerge, you keep it on your radar, you see to what degree that sort of growth and enthusiasm is organic, how much of it is coming just from communities across the world, like BRC20 especially got such a firm toehold in Asia, where I think it still remains very dominant, that it was no longer something that we could sort of ignore. And then I think crypto is the kind of space where it's very constantly adapt or die. And we had already been working on the infrastructure for an order book, DEX up until that time. And then with BRC20 tokens, suddenly, the kind of pieces fit together. And that we had been working on bridging infrastructure, unwrapping Bitcoin L1 assets onto stacks. We had been working on this order book infra, and we put those pieces together and it clicked. And I think that was one of the huge growth spurts that we saw for Alex, that double tripled our follower count and put us on the radar of a lot of people as these sort of like OG and really committed builders in the Bitcoin space. And so I think that sort of plays into it. And since then, we're very attuned to whatever might be new. We were very involved in runes, I think, really from this sort of go, and integrating that into our platform as well. And although it's still emergent in the sense that it hasn't yet come, we're also very excited to see Taproot Assets come live on Bitcoin, especially with Tether having announced that they will launch USDT natively as a Taproot asset. And so once that's out there, we're already, working on the infra to bring that live. And so really we're looking to build this sort of a connectivity and Bitcoin DeFi layer, across Bitcoin L2s, and other blockchains as well.
What's the implication of USDT on Bitcoin L1?
Yeah, I think potentially it's difficult to understate the sort of significance of it, because if we look back to 2021, for instance, and the sort of a summer of DeFi 1.0, I think a lot of it you can really trace to it being kicked off by the influx of stablecoin liquidity more than anything in particular. And so with USDT coming onto Bitcoin natively, one will be the opportunity for you as a Bitcoin holder to hold both Bitcoin and the largest stablecoin by market cap natively in your Bitcoin wallet. That is immense, because I think that's sort of the balance point on which all of DeFi hinges, is this exchange between going from crypto tokens such as Bitcoin to stable coins and back, and that movement with the oscillations in the market between, which is your sort of risk on asset, which is risk off. When are you sort of taking profit, and then when are you sort of buying back in? Not to mention that having USDT natively on Bitcoin, and Taproot assets as well. These are L1 assets built by Lightning Labs specifically to be compatible with Lightning Network. And so it's the idea that also you're also greatly expanding the footprint of Bitcoin as a payment system or network, and that users will be able, through Lightning, to within a matter of seconds do US dollar transfers 100% permissionlessly across the globe, secured by the hash power, immutability, and censorship resistance of Bitcoin itself. So within that sort of like framework, which is I think already immensely expands what the potential user base and use case of the Bitcoin network may be, is that Taproot assets, although built to be compatible with Lightning, these aren't exclusive to Lightning. As a Bitcoin L1 assets, just like runes or ordinals, you can transfer them through your standard Bitcoin L1 transaction. And so that is what ALEX will sort of be leveraging, and that we have this sort of infrastructure, such as through Xlink, that allows this movement of assets between the L1 and L2s. And so it won't be a great stretch of our current resources to incorporate Taproot assets as well. And we're already partnering with projects such as Jolts, who are building Taproot Assets SDKs. As Taproot Assets, at least so far, they aren't yet supported by the major wallets that are out there. I'm sure that that'll sort of change quickly, but we do want to have that kind of first mover advantage, so that as soon as these are live, we're able to incorporate them. And what that looks like is that, for example, users can use native USDT on Bitcoin as a reserve asset to mint AUSD, which is the sort of wrapped tether that we have on the ALEX network. Users will be able to use the Bitcoin DEX that we already have live on ALEX, so that you're a Bitcoin holder, say you're even a maxi to some degree, you can connect your Bitcoin wallet directly, and with one click through a Bitcoin transaction, do a swap from Bitcoin to USDT, and then from USDT and back, or from USDT to runes or to ordinals, and to have that as a native Bitcoin like experience. Right? Because something we found is that for a lot of committed Bitcoin users, the second they have to even use a different wallet or consider any other network, they sort of just shut down or don't consider it immediately. So, with ALEX, we do have Stacks as this universal smart contract layer, but that's almost been abstracted away. And that users don't necessarily have to create a Stacks wallet. They may not even be aware that the Stacks network is being used. If they want to dig into it, of course, all that information is 100% transparent and on chain. What matters to them is that they connect their Bitcoin wallet. They have that one click asset within, right now it's about 2 Bitcoin blocks to have the swap come and go. But we are working on, for example, cross chain hooks that allows that to be compressed onto a single Bitcoin transaction. So basically, as soon as you hit send in terms of swapping your USDT to Bitcoin, as you hit send before that transaction is settled on Bitcoin, that already triggers on Stacks the swap of USDT to Bitcoin. And it also triggers the peg out of that Bitcoin on the Stacks layer to the Bitcoin L1, so that within one Bitcoin block, you now see that everything has gone through, and now your USDT is now native Bitcoin in your Bitcoin wallet on the L1. So that's kind of the sort of like seamless interoperability layer that we want to get to, and that we want to make ever more intuitive and easier for users to use by the opportunities that AI tools present. And so on our 2025 roadmap is also ALEX AI that we're really excited to announce.
Okay, so I have two questions. One, help me understand the interoperability aspect of this and how the Taproot assets and the Stacks network either work with each other or how they're separate. Help me understand some of like the different L2s and their relationship to L1 Bitcoin.
Sure. So Bitcoin is unique in that security and its immutability, and the fact that, for example, its scripting language is non-Turing complete. But as a result of that is that its scripting, its native scripting language is relatively limited in what it can do. You know, it does send and receive transactions very well, and there have been some additional features that have built in with the SegWit and then the Taproot upgrades. But Bitcoin in and of itself, it doesn't communicate with or see blockchains or the world outside of it. In order to bring that sort of programmability as well as a scalability to Bitcoin, because as Bitcoin is currently built, it's just physically impossible that you'll have, for example, a billion users live on the Bitcoin L1 at once. It simply won't work. Fees would be spiked through the roof. And that's part of the long-term vision that Munib has had in building Stacks out as a network and a blockchain is to have that programmability and scalability, but anchored on the L1 through the very unique proof of transfer POX mechanism that Stacks utilizes. So Stacks, for instance, has long been able to natively read the Bitcoin blockchain because every Stacks block is born out of a Bitcoin transaction. The same way that Bitcoin is born out of committing energy. So it can be argued that it's almost a unit of energy in a certain sense. But so the fact that Stacks has been able to read the native Bitcoin state, and now with SBTC, we've made this huge leap of also being able to write to the Bitcoin L1 natively. And so of the Bitcoin L2s, Stacks, just from its very design, right? Just from the very layer on which it is born out of a Bitcoin transaction, has this very close relationship with Bitcoin and 100%, being secured by Bitcoin's hash power. That sort of is unique to Stacks, and that is what we sort of utilize when we say that we're building a Bitcoin DEX or Bitcoin DeFi. It's utilizing those tools, that security, to extend really what Bitcoin's capabilities are in allowing these sort of mechanisms on the L1, and that will look to just further expand, going forward. Like, for instance, I just mentioned, for example, doing swaps natively on Bitcoin. It's also in our roadmap in the future, for instance, that you can become an LP, meaning that you're able to add liquidity directly from the L1 and have those LP tokens represented as L1 assets in your Bitcoin wallet natively. And so, basically enabling these tools, which has, again, Stacks as the universal smart contract layer, it just opens up this sort of world of possibilities. And it does so in a way that is true to the Bitcoin ethos, that is, completely secured by Bitcoin, and that resides on Bitcoin in a way that I think is unique to Stacks, and that you don't see on other L2s, for instance.
Yeah, very well explained. Well, are there any other milestones that you want to touch on before we move on to ALEX DAMM?
Yeah, so a milestone certainly that we've hit within the sort of past month is that we've crossed over, 2.6 billion in total transaction value, which has been something that we're very proud to have reached and achieved. I think as of the moment, we're getting pretty close to 2.6. Well, no, we're getting close to 2.7. Actually, we've passed the 2.66 or 2.67 mark, and also just the sort of milestone of really having started Bitcoin DeFi before it became trendy, in a sense, right? Before there were Ordinals and before there were dozens of L2s, we always had this sort of long-term vision that the financial system of the future would be built on the immutability and security of the Bitcoin blockchain. And it's been great, I guess, over the years to sort of see that come to light, to sort of build those basic building blocks, and now assembling those building blocks into these more complex and sophisticated structures that we know and we see will enable new users that come onto crypto to be able to interact with the Bitcoin DeFi UX, perhaps entirely text based, say through an AI, which can provide 24/7 customer support, so that newcomers, if they ask, well, what does it mean to be a liquidity provider? What's impermanent loss? What are my LP tokens? What's like what are the sort of risks I'm taking? What's slippage and how do I adjust that? And not only does it ask those questions, which can it already do now, but through, say, AI powered smart contracts, users can then, through text based commands, say, okay, I want to swap $1,000 of USDT tether into Bitcoin. And through the AI prompt, it'll ask the users what the slippage level will be, what the range of values that they can receive are. And then the users can confirm, yes, I want to go ahead with this transaction. And without having to go through sort of like multiple UIs or interface screens, you can do that, right? And that's just a starting point. Where then in the future, through the AI, you can say, I have this Bitcoin in my wallet. Is there a way that I can earn a yield on it? And it'll provide a variety of options of what those yield opportunities are. And then again, just through interacting by text, or it isn't a stretch to even say by voice. And then by voice, that can also be, maybe like every language as well. So no matter where you are in the world in your native tongue, simply by speaking to it, you can execute and engage with these smart contracts, so that you're doing borrow lending, you're doing staking, you're doing yield farming, and you're getting the most out of your capital. And I think that's really the long-term vision that we've always had, to build universally accessible financial services to anyone, anywhere on the planet, with no gatekeepers and no middlemen. And I think every step forward is bringing us there. So the tech is absolutely solid. The fundamentals are there. That the sort of total addressable market is truly global. And although now we're in the moment with a lot of tariff upheaval, I think we know that sort of like tariffs come and go, but sort of tech is sort of forever. It was written in the stars that the car would replace the sort of horse and buggy. There were a lot of tariff wars and a lot of ups and downs in the markets between then and where we are now. But it was, inevitable that the landscape of the future would be the infrastructure of the automobile, and equally the infrastructure for the finance of the future. It is through blockchain. And again, unique among those will be Bitcoin and will always be Bitcoin. Um, if for no other reason, because again, that proof of work mechanism anchors it to the physical realm in the way that makes it almost a tangible asset, in as much as really gold is, like all those analogies to the digital gold, I think, are very much accurate in the case of Bitcoin. And it's unique in a way with, thousands of mining entities, many of them publicly traded companies, that is accepted in a way by institutions, by sovereign governments more than any other. And I think it'll continue to hold that advantage, which is not to say that the future may or may not be multi chain, but without a question, I think Bitcoin will hold that sort of keystone block as the anchor and store of value going into the future. So, if all roads lead to Bitcoin, then all roads on Bitcoin lead to L2, such as stacks. And ALEX, will be there as that kind of key DEX and key financial infrastructure for that ecosystem and network.
Yeah, to your point, Bitcoin and blockchain in general, it can democratize access to financial services. But honestly, there's still a huge learning curve for a lot of people. And
Absolutely.
that's why everything that you're talking about with AI, the ability for any uninitiated person to have a simple way of asking questions, of understanding, I guess, first what slippage is, and then maybe like down the rabbit hole, like what arbitrage is and
Right, right.
how they can take advantage of those opportunities. I think anyone who's curious about it now has to do a lot of like sleuthing back and forth, finding it's easier with AI now. You can jump into Chat GPT and ask these things, but abstracting again the the necessity to bounce back and forth between multiple things and having it all right there on the platform. That's a huge game changer. What's the timeline of this ALEX AI rollout?
Great question. Also a great point to make. I think anyone in our space that's helped onboard a new user knows that so much of it is answering dozens of questions, and which is as it should be. You know, like questions are how people feel comfortable, they feel secure, how they understand, and AI provides that, and in a scalable way that individuals can't, as well as also being able to provide execution in a way that individuals can't, right? And that, you could answer all the questions your friend may have. You can't, nor should you, be the one clicking confirm transaction on their crypto wallet, whereas AI is in the position to do that. And so, when I think of our kind of book of work and timeline for 2025, now I'm on the Alex Lab Foundation side. I'm more community facing. Alex Go, for example, like Chana, our CTO, is more on the dev side. I think our next big milestone that we're putting all the pieces together will be the ALEX DAMM, our discrete automated market maker for concentrated liquidity. Very likely, I believe, with work on ALEX AI occurring in parallel, but likely to follow. And that I think DAMM is a huge release and a huge step forward for Bitcoin DeFi that is really fundamental. I think that we get out there. And with that element in place, I think we can then pivot a bit more towards ALEX AI and explaining how it works. Because again, like if already using a basic AMM, like you said, the learning curve can be a bit steep. There's another learning curve that's involved in transitioning from a standard AMM to concentrated liquidity, right? It's a very powerful tool, but it is a bit more sophisticated. And so, I think having the AI in place there would be a great tutorial for users who want to sort of make that transition and explore the opportunities and strategies that a concentrated liquidity platform can offer.
Okay, so we're transitioning perfectly to DAM right now, but could you give us a little educational moment to understand? So maybe for the user who understands they hold Bitcoin, they've got their Leather wallet installed. Now they're curious about doing something else and they're looking at the ALEX platform and they're wondering, what is this? What do I need to know about DAM? Maybe it's abstracted away, but let's find the happy medium here. So could you just tell us, what is a market maker and what is the new innovation that DAM brings?
All right. Happy to do so. Okay, so a market maker has always been a fundamental element in marketplaces in connecting buyers and sellers. So, like if you'll remember growing up when, whenever the news would show stock footage of the New York Stock Exchange, you've got all those guys on the floor kind of like waving pieces of paper and shouting, and it looks like total bedlam. Those are essentially the sort of OG market makers, right? And that they're on the phone, they're getting an order to buy from one client, and immediately they're looking to offload that position. And somewhere in the middle, they're capturing a little bit of a spread. right? So basically, there's always that rule that's a profit. You have to buy low, sell high. So they're sort of buying a little bit lower and trying to flip as quickly as they can a little bit higher so that they can pocket that difference. And by doing so in volume and in size, they can do relatively well from themselves. And this is how you have all these kind of brokerage houses. So that's how traditional finance has done it for basically centuries, has been through human market makers. One of the massive innovations that allowed for what we today recognize as DeFi to be possible was Uniswap's release of the AMM, which is an automated market maker. So with an automated market maker, you're no longer relying on the human counterparty to be there as that middleman. And that's why, for example, like markets have, opening and closing hours, because since you're relying on humans to sort of make markets, yeah, there is after hours trading, but it's much less liquid because there are much fewer people who are providing liquidities during those sort of off hours. But now we're transitioning with an automated market maker from humans being those market makers to code doing the market making. And the Uniswap V1 AMM, it used a relatively simple, constant product formula of basically like a K times Y equals X, which is a constant. And so say K is Bitcoin, Y is USDT. So when you open up a pool, you add 50-50 equal value of each of those to the pools. And the product of multiplying those two results in a constant. So with an AMM market maker, when you want to buy or sell, you are basically adding to that K or the Y. So you're adding to one side of the equation and you're having an inversely proportional decrease of the value on the other side such that the product adds up to a constant. And so, this isn't mathematically accurate, but just to give sort of like as an example, say, if Bitcoin is 10 and your USDT value is 10, if you add 1 to Bitcoin, taking it to 11, then, comparatively, say the USDT value drops to 9. That isn't mathematically accurate, but just to sort of demonstrate that when the value of one goes up, the other goes down, inversely proportional. And this way, through this kind of formula, you have this 24 automated machine that no matter what time it is or no matter what size it is, you have a quote, you have a price that it's going to offer. And slippage basically takes into account the fact that there are other people who might be making those same offers at the same time, which means that there might be, a little bit of a percentage of leeway, give or take, on the accuracy of where that trade is executed on. And so that's sort of like the basic automated market maker formula as it works. And between that, there are still market makers who interact between that and say the prices that you see on centralized exchanges. So, if ever the price that an automated market maker shows is very different from a centralized exchange, then there are arbitrage opportunities. And you have either, humans or humans who build bots that take advantage of those opportunities that kind of keep those prices in line as much as possible. So that has been sort of the sorting starting point that gave birth to DeFi and the idea that we can have code take the place of humans as this sort of entity that connects this peer-to-peer based financial system. As we now look at concentrated liquidity, we're basically taking that foundation and we're increasing its sophistication a bit. And that for example, with the ALEX DEX as it is now, when you provide liquidity as an LP, meaning that you're adding a 50-50, an equal value of be it stacks ALEX or stacks SBTC or ABTC on ALEX and SBTC, you're adding that value 50-50. And in exchange for doing so, you're receiving a part of the trading pool fees, which people who are doing the swaps, they pay a small amount. It can vary from 0.05 to zero point 0.5 to a custom rate for the pool. That's what you would receive in exchange for locking up your liquidity and allowing it to be used in that sense. But as an automated market maker with that simple product formula, your liquidity ranges all the way from zero to infinity in a sense. Meaning, you've put that liquidity in the pool. If there's some, unspeakable market event that takes Bitcoin all the way down to zero, well, basically now in the pool, the other side of liquidity that you have, that is going to shoot up to some massive value. Vice versa, if Bitcoin absolutely just moons into $10 million overnight, you're absolutely likely to be wiped out if, say, the other side of that is you're holding USDT. But if you were to withdraw, now everything's been shifted into you have a massive amount of USDT because that's what remains in the pool now, because so much of that value has been withdrawn because people have been buying that Bitcoin actively. Now with concentrated liquidity, you can focus that liquidity from that zero to infinity range onto these sort of like narrow bands. And so, for example, with the ALEX DAMM, there'll be these sort of like discrete liquidity buckets of, say, 1% around where the current price is, 5% around where the current price is, 10% and 20%. And so by concentrating your liquidity around those price ranges, you're applying your assets where they are most needed, right? Where the most trading is actively occurring, which is, most users making small trades around where the current value of a token or a particular instrument is. And one of the things that allows you to do as a liquidity provider is that the potential yield you have is proportionally higher depending on how concentrated that liquidity is. Because in the sense, the sort of risk that you're taking as a market maker is also greater as well, right? And that, say that you're concentrated very much on that narrow 1% band. If Bitcoin remains within that 1% range, if it remains there for quite a while, you stand to potentially profit quite handsomely, because you may have an APR that could be in the sort of triple digit range, because there's, so much trading that's occurring right within that band, and you're receiving those fees because you're the one who's focused your liquidity right in that range. If Bitcoin, however, steps out of that 1% range, then you as an LP, if initially you put in 50, say, Bitcoin and USDT, if it transitions out of it, now if you withdraw those tokens, it'll either be all Bitcoin or it'll be all USDT. You see, because it's sort of it's slipped out of that range, and so that sort of conversion has occurred, and then it's sort of occurred counterintuitively in the opposite direction of the market. And so, so for example, if it's Bitcoin that's gone up in value and is outside of that range, you're going to be withdrawing all USDT. If it's Bitcoin that's dropped down 1% in range, it'll be all USDT that you withdraw. But in exchange for that, again, you were receiving those very high yields while you were right in that 1% band. So what's interesting about the DAM is that you can actually decide to spread out that liquidity over several different buckets. So you might have some right in that 1% range. You might have some in the 5% range. You might have some in the 10% and then the 20% range. And so you sort of have this kind of spectrum of a risk profile across which you're earning yields and across which your tokens may be exchanging in values. And we've sort of designed this in such a way. One of the innovations that we've contributed is that it was really Uniswap v3 that introduced the concentrated liquidity principle. But in that case, your LP tokens were represented by these NFTs. The issue there being is that, again, if you're providing liquidity across multiple ranges, you now have multiple NFTs that you have to manage. And if you're doing this across multiple tokens, very quickly that's becoming, a bit unwieldy. So with the ALEX DAMM, we have, efficient position management, where with a single transaction, you can kind of shift the range of your position in multiple buckets in a single transaction. And so, that makes it a lot easier to sort of manage those liquidity positions.
Okay,
And
so
yeah.
let me ask you. So as if I'm trying to think about like, okay, I want to do LP in the bucket of Bitcoin to USDT,
Yes.
and I want to be in a specific range. Do you have to commit to a certain time frame, right? Now, are you stuck in that time and you stuck in that range for that period of time, or did you just say that you can pivot anytime you want to and make changes anytime?
Sure. And so, so you're not necessarily committing to a certain time range. You're committing to a particular price range, would be more accurate. And you'll continue earning for that price range as long as you remain in that range. However, like once the price say moves away from that 1%, then your sort of liquidity position is converted entirely to one of those two pairs, depending on the direction that it went in. And so basically, you're kind of committing to the risk of
Yeah.
providing liquidity on that very narrow range.
Okay, but that's such an important piece of like diversification in someone's
Yes.
strategy, right?
Right. And so the way that you can diversify is again by diversifying across those sort of liquidity buckets. And so obviously like 1% Bitcoin moves a lot. So, unless you have a very high risk appetite, I think it's unlikely you'll probably put all of your liquidity there. It's more likely that you might have more in the 5% or 10% bucket, based on your risk profile, and that's where you sort of earn more with less of that risk of having that liquidity position liquidated in the sense of moving all towards Bitcoin or moving all towards USDT in a particular sense. What you can do, because again prices do move dynamically, is that you can withdraw that LP and reapply it across a different price range. And so, for example, if you're, say, 3 days out of a Fed, decision hearing, you might choose, what? I think I'm going to withdraw my liquidity because things might get choppy in the next few days. And then after the announcement comes out and prices look like they've renormalized, you can reapply that liquidity, or you can, for example, move the liquidity out of the 1% bucket into the 5% bucket, and you can make those sorts of position adjustments. And that's, I guess, how you can sort of like manage risk. And, I guess, from this perspective, we're looking at one half, which is the sort of liquidity provider perspective. The other side of that equation are your traders. And traders, of course, stand to benefit very strongly from this, because that liquidity is so concentrated right around where the action is occurring. You as a trader are receiving better prices. You're
Mm.
receiving less slippage. You have better execution, and that and since that works and benefits you as a trader, you're more likely to trade often. This is more likely to attract other traders. This in turn creates this kind of cycle of virtuous reinforcement, where that trading activity is rewarding the LPs more, so the LPs commit more liquidity, and now you have just basically this kind of you just sort of kick off a flywheel of growth, where better trading and execution leads to more liquidity, with liquidity of course being the sort of lifeblood of any DeFi protocol, right? Because there isn't a centralized market maker. It's really the sort of liquidity providers that make all of DeFi possible. And so by having concentrated liquidity and offering those liquidity providers the opportunities to earn these higher yields, we in turn benefit traders, and we in turn benefit the rest of the market and the ecosystem as a whole as well. Like, to give an example, I was just on the Stacks DeFi show talking to Tycho, for instance. And on Zest protocol, you can, for example, borrow up to about 200K at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, of AUSD, which is the ALEX wrapped USDT stablecoin. And the reason it's capped at 200K is because if there is, a black swan event, that's about the amount that with our current AMM DEX that you can swap in one go without slippage going haywire, for instance. However, now if you have DAM and concentrated liquidity, and now it's possible to, with one fell swoop swap, double, triple X that amount of AUSD, because so much more of that liquidity is focused right around where the price range is right at the moment. Now you can borrow 10 times as much as you could before from the Zest protocol. And with that AUSD you are borrowing, you can now apply that to all these other DeFi utilities across stacks and across Bitcoin DeFi. And so that's how like all these pieces kind of come together, and why we're really excited to sort of roll out these features. And not to mention that also as a trader you have these advanced swap mechanisms, such as immediate or cancel or fill or kill orders. And so for people who have used, centralized exchanges, you kind of might know these just by their terms of like limit orders, which is, if you want to get fulfilled at a certain price, you have the optionality that, if you want it fulfilled up to 50, 70%, and that's okay, you can adjust those specifications. Or if you have like a big block trade that either all of it gets fulfilled at this price or none at all, then you have the option of putting that into place as well. So kind of like with each iteration, DeFi is becoming more powerful because it's looking more like a centralized exchange experience, but without the centralization risk, which we saw with like FTX, for example, of what can happen when a centralized exchange collapses, and without also the sort of a KYC requirements or other regulatory requirements that are likely only to become stricter over time for centralized exchanges. And so, really, the idea is to bring DeFi to Bitcoin, and these are the sort of tools and long-term goals that we have in building that.
Don, your answers are so succinct and thorough that
I hope so. I feel like I'm rambling on a bit, so please feel free to let me know at any time if I can
that's all.
clarify anything. But thank
It's
you.
all perfect. No, it's really clear. I'm looking at this great list of other things we want to get to. So,
Let's do it.
because we could talk about the Surge, I know I want to talk about the Surge campaign. So, what is the Surge campaign? You just wrapped up the third one. What's the fourth one looking
Sure.
like?
And so Surge is really a community LP rewards campaign that we created, that we had a governance vote on ALEX, basically with the perspective that Nakamoto released. We're talking back in October of last year, but Nakamoto is coming. This is going to be a game changer for stacks. We expect a surge of new users. What exciting opportunities can we provide these users to kind of hook them into DeFi? And so basically, the Surge campaign allocated about 12 million ALEX in total, purely as Surge rewards for basically community LP pools. And so a lot of our core ecosystem pools, for example, like Stacks, ALEX, are excluded from Surge in order to make way for SBTC pools, for a lot of meme coin pools, for a lot of fellow protocol pools such as Deco. And the idea is that it's a bit kind of gamified, and that there was like a social leaderboard round, which will now be sort of more of like a trading volume or fee round. And those projects receive a sort of a little seed of allocation of what some of those foundation votes. And then basically the community of ALEX holders can then vote for the pools that they favor. And those votes, depending on what the final ranking is, determines how those 1 million in ALEX rewards are distributed. And there are these other gamified mechanisms, such as users can donate voter rewards. And so, for example, if you have a particular meme coin pool you feel very fondly on, and you want that meme coin pool to have high yields, one way that you can get people to vote for it is basically by offering rewards to the ALEX voters that vote. So that, if you vote for that pool as an ALEX voter, you have that neat little DeFi utility that you earn simply for voting. And on the other hand, if you're a member of that community, you now have greater yields that are likely to bring greater liquidity to that community pool. Greater liquidity, greater pricing. More likely, you might have whales making some big trades and buying big blocks. And so it's been really well received. Our last round provided some SBTC yields that I think were about 46% for for ALEX SBTC, TCSBTC, which is essentially a stable pair. So that really has kind of like a minimal risk for providing liquidity, was about 8%, and that's in addition to the Stacks SBTC yield of up to 5% that users receive. I believe Stacks SBTC was in the 20 or 30% range. And there were, some meme coin pools that were, in the triple digit range, 170, 240%. So, like it's fun because I think as the round nears the end, you have more complete information in the sort of game theory, and you'll have, people kind of like shilling their tokens or making these last minute moves or these sudden big whale votes that kind of change the layout of the board. And so I think, again, like making DeFi fun is always a good thing to do. And we've timed our Surge campaigns with major releases on Stacks. And so, for example, Surge was released along with Nakamoto. Surge 2 came out alongside the SBTC release. Surge 3 came out alongside the Cap 2 increase for SBTC that was filled within hours. And Surge 4, it's always been our plan to release alongside the SBTC Cap 3 release. And that is expected at the end of April at this month. We 100% stand behind the Stacks core devs and really making sure that the security is bulletproof before going forward. And so there's that for the community to look forward to. And I do get the question, well, what am I supposed to do with my LP tokens between Surge 3 and Surge 4? Again, check out the farming page on ALEX. There are, some great pools there that are providing 30-40% APRs. And so, you can choose to stake for 4 or 5 cycles. And this way you earn and you can withdraw those LP tokens just in time to participate in Surge 4. So there's definitely no lack for opportunity to earn on our platform.
Yeah, you just got to be mindful of time, like you said, 3 to 4 cycles.
Yeah, I'd say 3 to 4 cycles. Each ALEX cycle is about 3.5, about 4 days. So, but also keep in mind once Surge 4 starts, there is that initial registration period, which is about 1-2 weeks long. But as that date approaches, we'll make clear in our announcements just what to have in mind. But yeah, just be mindful. Don't overshoot it and say lock up your liquidity for 32 cycles because that's about 4 months or so. So just yeah, just have in mind earn a little bit and then you have time to withdraw and participate in the next Surge round.
Okay, good advice. Well, tell us about the permissionless self-service token listing.
Sure. So it's interesting in that it isn't even necessarily the first time that we've launched really a self-service listings before, but the way that we've implemented it this time is a bit unique. The reason being is that we've built on some really key work that Marvin Jensen has contributed to Clarity Stacks, the sort of GitHub that basically what it allows Stacks devs to do is to prove whether a deployed contract matches a specific code base. And so, not to get too technical into it, but it's something that's kind of long been the case on Ethereum, for example, is that you could launch a token using the code of another token. But previously, this hadn't been possible on Stacks. And so when you were to launch a self-listed token, there was a little bit of, say, of a middleman there, and that you had to either, like rely on an off-chain, deployer, or you had to have, someone basically, prior when there would be a self-listing, our devs would, basically review the code themselves to see that it's sort of like matched and it was a proper release of a Stacks SIP10 standard token, that there wasn't anything funny in the code. But ultimately that creates a bottleneck feature and didn't allow for full scalability of the self-service listing. So basically by building on Marvin's contribution and being able to the fact that now DeFi protocols on Stacks, they can interact with any tokens securely, and they can prove with certainty that code base matches an existing code base. That means that, say, if as we look ahead to the future, as we're sort of coming out of this kind of lull in altcoins, and you have this sort of like reinvigoration of people self-listing these community tokens, this is now possible in a vastly more scalable way that it wasn't before. That you can have, in that sense, truly permissionless self-service listing. That not only are you listing your own tokens, but we're using these contributions to the Stacks code base to know and have proof that those listings are being done in a way that that code matches the sort of standard code for SIP10 tokens, and therefore can launch securely onto our platform. And very quickly we can get that code or that token up and running and trading on the ALEX DEX, and and that can go live, and people can go ahead and again keep DeFi fun by having these community token and launch events.
And it very much is, it's like the logical next step, very much in line with the ethos of Bitcoin being
Yes,
permissionless.
exactly. Right. And so now again, instead of relying on people to verify that that token code is proper, now code is doing the verification. So again, we're moving towards, I guess, that overall vision and ethos of Bitcoin and of Satoshi Nakamoto.
Well, let's go back in about what, 1 year ago. Let's talk about the security update. So you released a new March security update, but if you could just, for anyone who is not familiar, who didn't know about the hack by the Lazarus Group last year, give us the full picture so we can understand the context here. What happened a year ago?
Sure. And so yeah, it'll be about a year in mid-May. So Alex was targeted by the Lazarus Group. For those who aren't familiar, the Lazarus Group is a North Korean government affiliated hacker collective that I think not even a month ago were the ones responsible for an exploit of $1.4 billion from Bybit. And so I remember in that, I just getting pinged that there were some suspicious transactions going on. At that time, I started reaching out and waking up the team in Asia, and it was one of those. Initially, it almost has that sense of like a waking nightmare. For those who haven't kind of gone through the experience, and something that I'll say for the team is that typically faced with a crisis, you have a flight, fight, or freeze response. And I would say, quite proudly that from the go, we immediately sort of went into fight mode. Immediately, for those who are around at the time, that was why the sort of the protocol was taken online as we determined what had happened, what had occurred. We immediately started building tracking tools, which weren't native to Stacks at the moment, to really follow all the affected assets, where they were being moved to, which wallets, how that was occurring. We immediately hired, security firms to sort of get to the bottom of how the hack had occurred. Yeah, the first 3 or 4 days, we were, some of us hadn't slept in 2 3 days. We started sleeping in 3 4 hour shifts, and we absolutely put up a hell of a fight to the extent that through the tracking tools we could see that whenever the hacker was sending stacks to these centralized exchanges to try to offload them, we were, and this was back when stacks was still slow.
Mm.
So, it was about, Bitcoin block times for those transactions. We were immediately calling, messaging, DMing, reaching out to those exchanges, getting in contact with people who knew who were running those exchanges, so we could go straight to the top immediately, having those accounts frozen, providing the on chain evidence of why those funds were suspicious and had to be frozen. The hackers kind of saw that occurring and then tried playing games and basically disseminating those funds across thousands or tens of thousands of wallets, which again we all we're tracking all of them. We have databases of all of them. When those tried to go to centralized exchanges, we sort of did the same. And I think we have about about 3 to 4 dozen centralized exchanges on the Rolodex that we're on the first name basis with. just because like absolutely like all of them we were on top of. We were committed to the degree of making every effort possible to not let like a single dollar slip through. And to that extent, we were largely I guess in terms of our efforts, relatively successful, because if you consider the fact that the Bybit funds, I believe, were washed in about a matter of 10 days through I think through Thorchain or other networks, the vast majority of the Stacks funds remain on chain because we just kept frustrating any efforts to use sexes or to offload those funds. And it's not enough just to freeze the funds. With these centralized exchanges, you also have to prove or have a legal case as to why. And so, we working with our legal counsel, using the on-chain evidence that we compiled, we were able to file a court order with the Singapore High Court that they recognized and issued a court order that we then forwarded to all the centralized exchanges that were affected. March marked a significant victory because it was the month where we had been able to make the greatest recovery of those affected funds. And so very close to 1 million stacks were returned to ALEX from 7 of the 15 centralized exchanges that we have been in contact with. We continue those legal efforts with the other 8 of those 15. Each of them has their own particular procedures or how they want things submitted or certain channels to go through. And each one, we follow those step by step. We're in frequent communication, and we follow their standard operating procedures towards the recovery of those funds. And so that remains ongoing. And we remain optimistic that we'll have further announcements of funds recovered through our Treasury grant program. And that's something that I'm also proud of. That on the ALEX page, if you go to our app and you go to the reopen tab, all of this is 100% transparent and on chain. So all of the protocol revenue that we've received from all the different trading pairs, that's live and online. Everything we've received from the different centralized exchanges is online and viewable. All of our past distributions to affected users, the distribution history, is live and accessible online. And that, we have done a community governance vote that 100% of all protocol revenue will go as recovery grants towards affected users. That will remain the case. And those distributions are done quarterly. So the last one was just done, I think, just shy of a week ago, and it was well over 1 million stacks because it was both the recovered stacks as well as the ALEX protocol revenues for that quarter. And just something that I comment on is that I'd see sometimes we'll post what the recovered assets and distribution from that quarter is, and someone might make a bit of a remark that well, according to my calculations, it seems that in about 20 years I'll finally have all my stacks back. Which I think yes, there is a time and place for that kind of gallows humor. But I think also the reason that we're here in Bitcoin and stacks right now is because we are incredibly bullish of the potential for this tech to, I would say, not just 10x but 100x, really. Because we're talking about, again, a product with a total addressable market of everyone on earth that uses financial services and has an interest in sound money and has an interest in having sound money that's yield generating and that is programmable and that is secure and that is entirely theirs and doesn't have written on it property of X and X government that can be inflated away or that can be locked down and frozen in the centralized bank account at the snap of the fingers. And so taking that into consideration, I absolutely, in my heart of hearts, not financial advice, I do believe stacks will hit new all-time highs from where we are now. Just there alone is potentially a 10x from where we are. I believe it'll even go much higher than that. And so, if there is a 10x in stacks, a 100x in stacks, it reasons to say that there will be a 10x increase in ALEX protocol revenues, a 100% increase in ALEX protocol revenues. And so now if you take that 20-year timeline and you 10x it, you're maybe looking at 2 years. You're maybe looking at a matter of months. And we've seen this, before, where right now, when the market is slow, we're looking at maybe an average of about 1 million in daily trading volume, which is, still the sort of the highest trading volume of any Bitcoin DEX across Bitcoin layers. But we have had days when Stacks and Alex were near their all-time highs, where we were seeing 14, $17 million and daily transaction volume. And so if you look at Bitfinex, for example, it took them about 6 years to make their users whole from when that exploit occurs. And it is my belief that we will make that happen in under that time. Because again, I do believe that there's a lot of tariff chaos right now, but tariffs don't change tech, as I've mentioned before. The tech is solid, the fundamentals are solid. I do think, Stacks and Alex were poised for at the minimum a 10x of where we are now, with potentially much more so, and protocol revenues from that are to follow. And we will absolutely, make our users whole as soon as market volumes really allow for. But we are here for the long haul. We've been building Bitcoin DeFi since 2021. Before there were even ordinals, and it was cool to create new Bitcoin L2s every other week. And we will continue to be here for the long term. That's always been our vision. And so I have just tremendous thanks and support, and for that I can really speak on behalf of the Alex team, of knowing that there have been people in our corner who have been cheering for us, who have been supporting us, who have been encouraging us from the very beginning. I'm very proud that we are getting back on our feet stronger than ever after a sort of event that I think very few projects can sort of recover from. That I can say proudly that in the aftermath of that hack, there wasn't a single resignation, not a single member of the Alex team posted, it's been great for my time with Alex, and I'm thankful, but I'm moving on to other opportunities, other projects. What does it say that not a single member of our team, that everyone stayed on board, everyone pulled together, everyone fought, and we continue fighting with everything we have. And I guess, to use a bit of a boxing or UFC analogy, there's a lot of people out there who can hit really hard, that can punch a sandbag with all that they've got. Very few people have a solid jaw. Very few people can take one square in the jaw with everything an opponent like a Lazarus Group can throw at you, and stand back up and keep fighting. Yeah, and and that really just speaks to really a collective effort, and an undefeated spirit. And so, that's what I'd say, that you don't necessarily invest in ideas, you don't necessarily invest in narratives, because those can change. You invest in tech, you invest in fundamentals, and you invest in people, right? You invest in teams, you invest in those who are executing that vision. Um, and that's why I'm very proud to be a part of the Alex team, and I think it's absolutely amazing to have come from where we are to where we are now. And to me, the future, it couldn't look any brighter, between DAMM and Alex AI, and some other features, some other alpha I am not yet at liberty to leak, but will be coming out in the coming weeks and months. That just should have everyone. If you're at all interested in Bitcoin DeFi, you should be very interested. And if you're at all interested in stacks, this is absolutely right up your alley. Because again, we're always using stacks as this universal smart contract layer, as this abstracted smart contract layer that is just enabling things on DeFi that otherwise wouldn't be possible. But not only are they possible through the stacks layer and the tools built through Alex, but they're possible in a way that's 100% backed by Bitcoin hash power, that is occurring on Bitcoin itself, that does contribute to Bitcoin revenue and fees. And that is, and again, has from its very beginning, from its very inception, from Munib and JP Singh, had the vision of bringing the most successful experiments that we've seen with other chains back home and building them, on the granite block that is the security and the mutability of Bitcoin. And that's why we're all here. That's why we keep building. We've never stopped building. Whether the market is up or down, we don't care. We know where we're going. We know where we're sort of taking the ship, which is universally accessible financial services globally on Bitcoin. And that's where we're going to get. So, so thank you for the opportunity to be able to address that. And yeah, and to thank everyone who's believed in us along the way. Uh, yeah, and that we're here and we're running a marathon, not a sprint, and we are all still very early. I know that sometimes you want to pull your hair out, hearing that for the upteenth time after God knows how many up and down cycles. But we really truly are, and yeah, and thank you, really.
Don, I couldn't have imagined how comprehensive and in-depth your answers were to everything. We have a really strong understanding of what ALEX is accomplishing now and how bright the future is and all the challenges that you've overcome. That's an incredible, the picture that you've painted in such great detail. Before we end, though, I mean, it wouldn't be a complete show if I didn't take the opportunity to just learn a little bit more about you. So let's start with DeFi Poet. What's the poetry connection for you?
Yeah, so so I guess the poetry connection is that something that Chanda Shu, Alex co-founder, and actually I know her through in that her husband was my managing director at Goldman Sachs. Just like an absolute gentleman and a scholar, a PhD in atomic physics, and we got along really swimmingly. But I pretty much I very nearly almost minored in Harvard in literature and poetry. So I've always, I don't know, I've always just like had a had a knack for kind of just pulling pulling quotes out of the air. And so when I was working with Chanda and writing rule based investing, a big message of that book was that like at the end of thinking of all of these very complicated methodologies and quantitative analysis methods to determine when markets are flashing signs of risk on, risk off, it really comes down to these sort of like simple principles. And so like among the sort of little snippets of poetry I would add to the book would be T.S. Eliot's famous line that at the end of all our explorations will be to return to where we began and know the place for the first time. I'm butchering it a bit there, but it's more or less kind of along those lines that really I think at the end of a long journey or at the end of profoundly knowing a subject, you almost return to this beginner mindset and you go back to the basics, but it's like for the first time you get it and for the first time it clicks and you sort of understand it. So, well, an interesting fact. Actually, my senior year of Harvard in the housing lottery, I actually was in T.S. Eliot's room when he was an undergrad. I was in an Eliot house. His father or grandfather was one of the Harvard presidents. So there's like an Elliott house. There's this corner first floor room that's really spacious, and I locked in through the housing lottery, and I got to stay there. Yeah, during my senior year. It was great. It has like river views and everything, so it was awesome. So things will come to mind, whether it's like a T.S. Eliot or Wordsworth or a Robert Frost or sort of like Tennyson. I think that's something that I kind of just like rely on. These sorts of words of conviction. And sometimes you can draw on them from the classics. Sometimes you can draw even some from sort of like from recent cinema when like Rocky says life's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. So I think just little bits of that. And I think when I joined ALEX as well, not being a dev myself, I felt like how I could contribute was by trying to help humanize crypto as much as possible by, taking complex or technical ideas and digesting them down to these easier to parse building blocks so that people can understand, and framing in a more in a more humanistic way, like what it is that we are pursuing with the mission of decentralization, of what Bitcoin really represents, of why, it's still, as much as we see it and we look at it on these charts, it's absolutely lightning in a bottle. It's this kind of miracle that exists, that it's out there, that you have just all this tremendous amount of hash power, and it's doing extremely valuable work. It's almost ensuring, in a way, that this kind of future of a kind of brighter humanity, in a sense that, I think these are times where it can be very easy to become jaded, to be a part of a sort of generation that, um, for the first time, has a bit of a lesser standard of living than our previous generations have had, and to just want to, tune out, or think that, want to opt out of the system, or just become cynical, or ignore it altogether, or try to escape from it. But there is this incredibly powerful alternative, right? And I think Bitcoin kind of represents that there is this alternative path that we can go down, where, the power isn't just in the handful of a dozen or 150 mega billionaires sitting around in the room deciding what direction the world takes in, and you're just this helpless bystander. By buying into Bitcoin, by owning Bitcoin, you are actively voting, right? You're actively opting into a radically different system that cuts out these middlemen entirely. That is, against censorship, that is against these restrictions, that is against, deciding who can and who can't be part of the financial system. That is against people you haven't even voted for, and the Federal Reserve deciding to drain the value of the dollar bills in your wallet through inflation. And so in all these ways, I think that's what we progressively want to wake people up to, is that I think people first catch on to Bitcoin as a speculative or a financial instrument because they hear of Bitcoin billionaires and just the absolutely wild APRs it's delivered. But I think, if you can just scratch a little bit further and communicate this sort of ethical methods, this sort of ethical message to people of this sort of ethos, and how this is, an alternative to, quote unquote, all that's wrong in the world, in a sense, fix the money, fix the world, as kind of the saying goes. But if you can have people really see that, and even, just catch a glimpse of it and begin to believe in it, that is so much more powerful than simply money itself. Because, don't get me wrong, money counts for a hell of a lot, but money isn't everything. Money can't necessarily grant meaning.
Hmm.
And having that kind of mission, having that view of Bitcoin where it does grant meaning, where you see how that mission is extended and furthered and empowered by stacks, and how, that really truly is, proud to be part of the stacks community as well, because this isn't a fly by night operation that, sprung up to, like, just, ride a narrative and cash in, cash out. You can see just, this decades long journey that Munib and the stacks team has taken to do things slowly, meticulously, do them right, do them properly, do them securely, execute them technically in the right and proper way. And when that comes together, and, you have a team like Alex, all former five financiers, bringing collectively about almost like 7 or 8 decades of TradFi experience, who have all left that behind with the vision that this is inevitably the direction that finance and the monetary system is going to go to. When the pieces all sort of fit together, I think it paints an extraordinary future. It's the future that I want to help my daughter inherit. It's the future I hope my grandkids are able to experience, where they have control of their financial destinies, and then a immutable, censorship free, completely permissionless, peer to peer based system that they can access simply by having a Skylink connection or through the smartphone or whatever technological device that they'll have in their pocket. And that's what sort of keeps us going, despite all the sort of naysayers and all the Bitcoin is dead, Stacks is dead news that you hear. There's something much deeper. There's something much more profound behind it. And sometimes, when words don't really get there, you have to sort of rely on sort of poetry to kind of make it happen. I'd say I'm just a sort of aspirational poet in that sense, but I hope, as time goes by, to use just that ability of language, and the people I'm fortunate enough to communicate with and who express a willingness to want to learn or know more, why it is that this is my particular field, this is where I work in, this is what I'm so passionate about, and why Bitcoin is so much more than what you think it is. And and just bringing these things all together, I think is what it all kind of comes down to. And yeah, and I thank you, Sean, for the ability to just express those feelings and sentiments and allowing this sort of time and space to do so. It's been really a pleasure having this discussion with you. Not to cut the spaces off short, I'm glad to answer any other questions,
Yeah.
but just as a collective whole, it's really fortunate. I think even if you're someone watching this space either live or recorded, the fact that you're in a position to even know that this is occurring is a reason for tremendous gratitude in life, because there's so many people who are only going to find out about this, way down the line, when the returns may not be as extraordinary as they are right now. And so yeah.
Incredible, Hadan. When I hear you talk so eloquently about what Bitcoin could be, three words come to mind, and that is Bitcoin is hope. And I'm going to put you on the spot and ask for some passage, some quote, maybe a snippet from a poem related to moving away from apathy, which you talked about, toward engagement. What's something that reminds you of, I guess, that something that is inspiring, that can encourage and make people move from that state of apathy toward engagement?
Sure. First thing that springs to mind might be one of my all-time favorite poems, Ulysses by Tennyson, which is a long form poem. But Ulysses is the Odysseus from Homer's Odyssey. Basically, you're sort of an OG Western hero going on a hero's journey. And towards the end of Ulysses, it's kind of Ulysses just being the Anglican version of the name Odysseus. But Ulysses is reflecting back on his life, and it says something about the constant sense of striving in the human spirit, which I think it's something along the lines of, as he looks towards the sunset, he's imagining like one last adventure, and he's like, although we are not now that strength which in days and old moved heaven and earth, that that which we are, we are, and an unequal tempered of heroic hearts, made not weak by time and fate, but yet strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And so, yeah, so I think there's a certain beauty in that. That the sort of meaning of life is to strive. That the meaning of life is not to yield. Or I guess another great one. I mean, I don't know who to attribute this to. It might well be a GPT, but it's something along the lines of, don't pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And so, and so I know, as a fellow alt holder myself, these can be kind of demoralizing times. And I know just that sort of like familiar question of like, when rich, like when can I just like hang up the boots and live the easy life. But but I think there's more to it than that. I think that's what that poem speaks to. That I'd like to think that even as a hopefully wealthy and hopefully fortunate enough to get to old age, that you can sort of like stand on those shores and look westward and see the sun setting and just like summon up this spirit that instead of like sleeping the days away, like let's take like one last voyage onto the horizon and beyond. And the days of old, that was through seafaring. I hope that in the future that looks like moon or Martian colonization and whatever form it takes. But I think that is the spirit that is probably most sort of noble of humanity. And to know that we are not descended from sort of like tame or meek or meager people. We are the ones who sailed across the seas. We are the ones who kind of like stood on the battlements. We are the ones who endured unimaginable hardships and fears and terrors, but never relented, never gave up, and never laid down their arms. And no matter how many times the world came apart, we pieced it back together again, and we will continue to sort of do so. And so I think that's sort of message is that apathy is too easy. Apathy is boring, and at the end of the day, choose the more interesting option. Or as the kids today say, do it for the plot.
Oh, yeah. Do it for the stories.
Yeah, yeah, do it for the stories. Is your story
Yeah.
going to be, yeah, and then he made $10 million and spent the rest of his days playing PlayStation and on social media? Or, like he made his fortune, but it wasn't enough. And he would be, like one of the people to colonize, to colonize the moon, to colonize Mars, and set, like a new precedent of what people can do. And then right now, like we are very much on a financial frontier, with Bitcoin, with stacks. That's why this is hard. That's why sometimes it feels like we're on the verge of will they, won't they make it? This is consistently the story you hear of the Jamestown colonies, or when the sort of like the New World was discovered, or when new places are sort of are colonized. It's really, really difficult, and it's often that way for generations. But, because of persistence, but because of that unyielding human spirit, we've built the world that we've built today, and we've realized the best quality of life that any generation of humans have ever had. Like never doubt for 1 minute that you have been born in the absolute best moment in time to ever exist. With
Hmm.
I would say some of the as we were discussing pre-show, some of the best music, the best opportunities for growth. You have, a world of technology, the world's libraries at your fingertips, and now you have these AI assistants to curate it for you at the same time. And so, don't let yourself be sort of like entertained away and let the time just pass. But like strive, stay in the game, get out there, like recruit others to the cause, spread the message, hold firm, DCAN, and understand that again, tariffs are temporary, tech is forever, and the driving force of human culture has and always will be technology and science that has solved every problem we've encountered, from being predated upon from the saber-toothed tiger, to polio, to facing hunger, to needing fresh water, to in the future financial freedom, to having hope that things can be brighter again, that we aren't just under the heel of these powers that be who own the world and there's nothing we can do about it. There is. And every time you're opting into Bitcoin, that you're opting into stacks, that you're opting into ALEX, that is a choice that you are actively making. Whether you know it or not, but you know what? I think you'll be a whole lot happier if you do know it, if you are aware of it. And so, yeah, and so that's, I think, what I'd kind of leave off with, that we're all in this together. And that's what Bitcoin is. It's a peer to peer, right? A cashless system that's immutable, uncensored, and truly decentralized. And it belongs to us and to no one else. And
And if
then,
you don't If you don't use it, you lose it.
You
Got to
know,
use it.
if you don't use it, you lose it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of a risk taking, taking a leap of faith really resonates with me. At several points in my life, I've been compelled away from the easy
Yeah.
route.
I agree.
Be first of all, like moving into Bitcoin and then working full time into Bitcoin now. Even like moving to France. I moved my family from California to France, and that's not easy.
Amazing.
You got
Where
to
in
have a
France? I was there in
long.
February.
Really? I had no idea. Let me
Yeah. Are
know
you in
next time.
Paris or?
A few hours southwest of Paris. Yeah, Loire Valley ish. It's an amazing place, especially for this time in my life when the kids are young. And yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. But oh my gosh, not without its hardships and difficulties, I tell you.
Yeah. 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 Been there too. I've been pretty nomadic, I'd say, in places I've stayed or resided. But yeah, well, Robert Frost, right? Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the path less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And so, I just always keep that in mind. If you've got the easy way and you've got the hard way in front of you, there's do it for the story. Take the hard
That's
way.
right.
You're
Yeah.
you're only going to live once. Make the most of it. Why be bored walking down this wide, breezy, easy avenue when you can discover these like unknown vistas and God knows what else when you take that narrow, maybe bramble strewn path. But yeah, there's just something exciting about that too. To be the first or to see what other eyes haven't seen. And there's always going to be a price to pay for that. Risk return always. So I favor the side of risk. Might favor it the other way, but for each of us, that's kind of our decision, right, and life path to choose. Yeah, I'm very glad and proud to have chosen this kind of crypto route, and plan to continue down it for as long as it may be, which yeah, well, more likely than not be indefinitely. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You
just at the
can't exit.
beginning.
There is no exit strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like and if there is, it isn't pretty, guys. It's one of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, the exit strategy is like the ending of 1984. What does the future look like? It looks like a boot stomping on a human face. So let's not choose that. There's other ways, and we have the tech. We're solving it. We're just early, but don't don't give in. It wasn't on the first try that the car was built or that the first rocket flew. So again, we're gonna make it work. The
Amazing.
tech is there and the fundamentals are there. So
Yeah.
let's
Plan
make it
B.
happen.
Well, that was a really long, beautiful conversation. I think we're gonna have to have a part two, Hadan, because
Let's
there's
do it.
just so
Let's
much
do it.
we can keep talking about. But thank you again. I'm really honored to be able to just have this conversation with you and to
Oh,
bring
same.
these.
Equally so. Yeah.
Yeah, and not only just bringing the details about how incredible Alex is, but also to get your insights and background and what you're bringing to the space and your team and all of us. So thank you so much, Hadan. It's a real honor to have you here.
Absolutely. And by the way, let's consider the idea of a crypto jazz space, and we'll discuss some Django Reinhardt, Alan Holdsworth,
I
and the
know
rest of the crew.
the people need to know. It's a small, like, we will get those 12 people to listen.
Absolutely. All
All
right, Sean.
right.
Take care. Thank you so much again.
You too. Everyone, if you are not already following Hadan, please do so on X at DeFi Poet. Love that name.
Yep.
We
And
are going to be
Alex
back.
at Alex Lab BTC.
Alex Lab BTC. Don't follow the fake accounts. Alex Lab BTC on
Yes.
X. Yes. All right. Well, again, everyone, thank you for joining us. I mean, that was a great conversation. So share this one with your friends and the community because there's a lot of good nuggets of wisdom in this one. And we're going to be back again next week, next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern, as always. And we're going to be taking over. We're going to be taken over by the crew at the at D, not D Grants, Deorganized Media is going to take over the
Oh,
Leather
nice.
Lounge next week. So, and then after that, we have a special Earth Day episode, which I'm not going to talk anymore about because we'll leave those details for a couple of weeks. But lots of great shows coming around the corner. Make sure you're subscribed, like, subscribe, leave us a review if you have not done so already, please, on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. All right, everyone, we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Thanks again for joining us in the Leather Lounge. We record each episode live every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And if you'd like to listen in or join us on stage, make sure to give us a follow on X at LeatherBTC. Leather is your gateway to everything Bitcoin, from DeFi to stacks, ordinals, runes, stamps, NFTs, and more. You can find loads of helpful crypto content on our YouTube channel and visit our blog and Learn Center at leather.io.